The following is a Hoop Ball presentation. Welcome to the Fantasy NBA Today podcast.
Well, friends, the finals are over. And regardless of how your team did, I think we can safely say that the next few days will be a little bit less stressful. But, that being said, victory tastes so sweet. So sweet. Winner! Yes! Came home with a damn trophy. I did it, guys. I hope you guys did the same. I know many of you did. Based on the responses that I got on Twitter, a decent chunk of you also brought home a trophy. And that's, well, it didn't go so great in every league. There was one head-to-head spot where I just had like a 7-game disadvantage coming into the week. So no matter what I did from a streaming standpoint, I couldn't catch up. And my opponent was no dummy. He also streamed, boosted his guys, using moves the week before, doing the whole thing, the right way to do it. And so I had no prayer in that one. So I got wiped out in the semis of that crazy league that I'll be having a chat with the commissioner about why it's a 4 teams make the playoffs, and it's the last 17 days of the year. We got to move that up a little bit. That's crazy. Because now the silly season has really kicked into effect. But nice pot from the other one. First place in one league, and then, we'll count down the days here on Roto. More than likely, I will be able to afford a new laptop, which is something I've been needing desperately, because sometimes you just get a lemon, don't you guys? Sometimes you just get a lemon. This laptop I got, I think it was in the winter of, it was like November, December of 2015. So it's like 3 and change years old. And the fact that it's now that old makes me feel a little bit better about the fact that I'm going to throw it through a window. But it basically broke within like a year of buying it. And when I say broke, I'm not a computer dummy. I don't know how to program, but I'm pretty good with hardware. I can upgrade my desktop PC and whatever, adjust my bifocal stuff you guys want to talk about on that front. This one went beyond the pale. Beyond the pale. The charging port on the laptop that I'm talking about, the actual port itself came disconnected from the motherboard. I had to take it to a shop for someone to solder it. I don't know how to solder. I do know how to spell solder, which I didn't at the time, but now I do. And they had to solder my charging port back onto the laptop. And I'm guessing that's probably when other things started to break down. The hard drive is messed. It freezes for 15, 20 minutes. It's garbage. It's a garbage machine. I had my previous laptop for 11 years, from 2004 to 2015, and it was still running well, but the actual keys on the laptop started just ejecting themselves. It was like, we're so old, Dan, please just put us out of our misery. Whee! Off goes the Q key. Anyway, very excited that I can go buy myself a new laptop so I can finally do stuff related to basketball and life, not in the tiny corner of my bedroom that has become my office. Congratulations to all those out there who won their leagues. If you guys still got stuff going, don't worry, we're still going to hit that up. First thing I want to do on today's show, before we even get into what the whole plan for the show is, and you know the plan, it's going to be streaming stuff and reverse chronological deal, is breaking news. Because you guys know me, I record large portions of the podcast late the night before. Most of this show was. But actually, believe it or not, this segment right now at the beginning of the podcast was recorded last. I'm letting you behind the curtain here. And we've had a bunch of injury news break first thing in the morning. So we'll go through that very quickly here, and then we'll launch into the rest of the stuff. Jimmy Butler has been scratched from Philly's game tonight. Not a drop. It's back tightness, they're calling it. It's not even like a legitimate injury at this point, so it feels like a rest game. For Philadelphia, they do have 6 games the rest of the way, so they're going to likely give their guys some days off. He probably, my guess would be, plays 3 or 4 of the remaining 6 games, so you're rolling him out there. Darren Collison back out with a groin injury. Seems like maybe he came back too soon. They only have 5 games the rest of the way, so missing this one and then the Detroit game I would call questionable because groin stuff is dicey. You could wait, or you could trade him in for somebody with 6 games. That's an okay one from my perspective. Wesley Matthews, hamstring, he's also out for Indiana, so suddenly they have a completely new backcourt of Tyreek Evans and Corey Joseph. That means that there is some value there if you think any of these things last. I would bet that both Matthews and Collison play again before the season's over, but I honestly don't know what game it's going to be. I really don't. Maybe the Boston game. I mean, they're fighting for home court in that particular 4-5 situation, so there's a little bit of a reason to get into it. I just don't know. The silly season is so silly that there's almost no way to predict for sure. Your best hope here is to try to put all the data together, come up with any kind of reasonable thing. The Pacers and the Celtics are tied, 45 and 32 right now. They're a dead heat for the 4 and 5 seed. So that ends up being kind of an important game. But also, the Pacers realize they've got no shot if they're not healthy, if they don't have Matthews and Collison ready to go. So I don't know what ends up winning out in this battle. I do know that from a fantasy perspective, Wesley Matthews with 4 games is not that intriguing. So he, to me, becomes a pretty easy drop at the beginning of the week for someone with 6 games. But again, and I'm going to get into this later in the podcast, I really don't want you guys using more than one move today. Luka Doncic is considered doubtful for Dallas. I think you're probably sitting on him because they have 6 games the rest of the way, and if he plays in even 3 or 4 of them, it'll be worth it. Sounds like Jonah Bolden is going to get the start in that Sixers game as they go big. Everybody else slides down a little bit. Tobias Harris now would be the 3. Well, no, because Joel Embiid is still out as well. So they're down a couple of bodies in that one. So I don't know what the rest of the starting lineup is going to look like. So Jonah Bolden is an interesting grab if you need a short-term fix, maybe a slot that you move on from after the Milwaukee game, their 3rd game of the week, something like that. But again, you got to be so judicious with your moves. James Harden, who was questionable, is going to play. It's amazing how many guys are missing games, and Harden, with his team basically just locked into a playoff spot right now, just keeps rolling. They want that 3 seed. They don't want to slip into the 4 and have to get into the Warriors, Jazz, Thunder bracket right now. But things can change over this last week and a half. So you can try to game it as best as possible, but it's tough to know exactly how it's all going to shake out. And Rodions Kurucs, I think, was the only other news in the morning. He's questionable. Cody Zeller's still out. None of that changes much of anything that you're doing in the fantasy landscape. So that's the breaking news of Monday morning. And now we can go back to either celebrating or mourning the end of the season. Still some roto leagues going, but guys seem pretty well locked into their final position. I have a couple of weird fleeting hopes that someone's going to kind of forget to set a lineup properly, and maybe I can take advantage of that, but nothing is guaranteed in that regard. At this point in the year, it's pretty hard to move more than a point or 2, and so you really got to be locked in tight, which is not crazy. There are a ton of roto leagues where you're within a point or 2 of your competition. So certainly don't give up. If you're within a point or 2, keep fighting. Go for it. Go nuts. See if you can sneak that 3rd place away or 2nd place or whatever it is. But I know on my side, there's like 2 or 3 points separating everybody at this point, and that's a really tough one to move unless somebody forgets to set a lineup. That's basically the only hope. So a few things going on. I've got these weird outside chances. I'm sure you do as well. Keep stat hunting. Keep stat hunting. That's what you got to be doing now. Problem is that it's really hard. There's a lot of inconsistency, and things are about to get super weird. Some of you are sending me Twitter screenshots of, dropping Kawhi Leonard for Bruno Caboclo and weird stuff like that, where you just, you need to make sure you hit your games limit, or dropping Zach LaVine. All these guys that are basically shut down. Anthony Davis appears to be basically shut down. We'll get into all that as we go through phase 1 of our stuff today. Weird moves this time of year, and it's only going to get weirder over the next week and a half. We're going to continue to have the podcast, and we're going to continue to roll through the offseason as well. We're not quite into recap mode yet. We're close, but we're not quite into recap mode yet. We'll get there. There will be time. Here's the thing, and this is a message I put out to all of our guys at Hoopball on the audio-visual side. You got a whole offseason to do all that stuff, to kind of recap and rest your brain and get set for next year. We're going to just keep going hard the next, I guess it'd be like 9.5 shows, and make sure that we don't miss anything as we roll into the final few minutes here of the 2018-2019 campaign. There are some of you who have head-to-head leagues that are still going. There are some of you that have roto leagues that are definitely still going. Those often and should go to the last day of the year. You use up your games when you have to. So we're not going to turn that off right now. This would be a very easy time to just go, all right, thank goodness we made it, and mail it in. But we're not mailing it in. And so today, we've got reverse chronological lightning round. And as we go through that, I'll just make brief mentions of how the scheduling situation plays out. But I do have some thoughts before we even get into the individual teams' schedule anomalies. And that's basically, if you're in a head-to-head league over this final week and a half, you likely have your moves cap for the full 10 days, not 4 for the first 7 and 4 more moves for the next 3. It makes streaming really hard when you have to try to do it over 10 days instead of 7. It's why basically the Besbris, registered trademark, long streaming is incredibly important, and frankly, it's why you basically have to dial down the number of slots you're actually, active streaming to probably 1, and then just go to guys that have a lot of games in the other slots. That's the other move here. What do I mean by that? Well, if this was something you were kind of looking ahead for, you'd look for teams that play games late on finals week, and then a lot of games the post-finals era, which is right now. This is post-finals for me. If your head-to-head league is still going, you should switch it next year because things are about to get super silly. And also, you want to make sure you save moves because things are going to get nuts over the final couple of days of the season. So there are a handful of teams that have 6 games over the last 10 days that also played on the final Sunday of finals week, but we're past that, so it sort of doesn't matter. Here's my take on where you're at. There are just a couple of teams where you kind of want to bail out early. The Pelicans are one of them. They have only 4 games over the final 10 days, which is not good. You needed me to tell you that? No, you knew that already. That's not good. The Wizards, I believe, have 4 games over the final 10 days, and I think that might be it. There's a reasonable chance that I'm missing somebody. The Clippers have only 4 games over the final 10 days as well. So if you have guys on those teams that are not the core guys, so for the Clippers, Lou Williams is a core guy, Gallo, Montrez. That's probably as far as it goes. Not even Pat Beverly because he's been cold lately, and frankly, I think he's playing through his hip thing. For the Pelicans, honestly, I don't even know who's a core guy anymore. Julius Randle. Even Elfrid Payton is a little bit fringy since he stopped triple-doubling every single game. Christian Wood might be your best guy on that team right now. And then for the Wizards, it's probably Bradley Beal. And, honestly, maybe Thomas Bryant right now, but I'd rather have somebody going 6 times. It just gives you so much more wiggle room. So if you have a fringy guy on one of those teams, it's probably an okay time to move off of them to start the week, to use 1 or at most 2 of your roster moves early in the week to trade them out for any of the teams with 6 games to go and guys on those teams that will likely play in 5 or 6 of those games. So the teams that have 6, Charlotte, Dallas, Denver, Detroit, Golden State. Yeah, there's a lot of options here. Miami, Minnesota finally has a week where they have good games played. New York still has 6 games to go. Philadelphia, their schedule finally gets better. Portland's schedule continues strong. And Utah, after a 1-week blip, their schedule goes back to being good again. So here's one thing you also need to be careful of, however. And that is using too many of your moves early in the week. Because a lot of things can go wrong. A lot of things can go wrong. Guys are going to disappear. It's just how it works. You're not going to be able to stop it. Someone's going to vanish on you. And the only thing you can do is be prepared with a move bucket, a couple of them, hopefully, that will allow you to react to your guy being shut down. So you don't want to use more than 2 moves early in the week because probably 2 or more of the guys on your team are going to disappear. I would say try to only use 1 move. So if you have a bunch of guys on the Clippers, the Wizards, and I already forgot, Charlotte, who the hell was the other team I mentioned with only 4 games? It was the Clippers, the Wizards, and the Pelicans. You might have some Clippers and Wizards because they've had pretty good schedules leading up to these last 10 days. Like I have Satoransky, Portis, and Thomas Bryant in one spot. I just loaded up on Wiz, and for most of the time, by and large, that worked out well. Problem would be, luckily that league is over, so I don't have to worry about it anymore. But maybe you do still have to worry about it. So you were riding high on your Wizards with 3 consecutive 4-game weeks, and then all of a sudden, boom, 4 games in 10 days. That's not good. If you have multiple players from the Wiz, the Clippers, or the Pels, I think your move here has to be to dump your weakest one for somebody with 6 games. You just have to do it because it's such a rarity that you can use a move to gain 2 games when you're streaming. And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, well, why wouldn't I do it for a bunch of guys then? That's actually a pretty good question. I should have asked it myself. Well, here's why I don't think you can do it. Because you could get nailed with a shutdown on Wednesday. And one of the guys on your team that you expected to play 5 games from Wednesday through next Wednesday gets shut down. So that's a -5 if you don't have a move to adjust for it. So it's great to make a move to gain 2 games, but you might need to have some moves available to avoid losing 3, 4, or 5 games. That's the net gain that you have to be looking at over this final week and a half. So I would say 1 maximum move today. Unload your weakest 4-gamer headed down the stretch and pick up someone on one of these teams that's playing a bunch of games and should have some pretty good usage under their belt. Jalen Brunson might be available in your league. Charlotte, let's see. Miles Bridges, he's probably picked up. Dwayne Bacon had kind of a crummy... I mean, most of them had a clunker of a game against the Warriors. Charlotte's got some interesting guys in their 6-gamer. We mentioned Dallas. Denver, not much. Detroit, if you want one of their streaky shooters, that's a possibility. Miami, amazingly, Dion Waiters has actually been pretty good. Dwayne Wade doing his farewell tour thing. Minnesota, you got a bunch of choices there with Okogie, Jones, guys that might have been dropped because of their not great schedule. New York, Manuel Mudiay, Kevin Knox, all these points leaguey sort of guys, but with 6 games, they can rack up some stats for you in a head-to-head format. Philadelphia, not much. Most of the guys on that team you just sort of been riding with the whole way anyway. Portland, obviously Seth Curry's a guy you probably had from last week if you were already streaming. You just let it ride. Obviously Enes Kanter. Even fringier guys like Zach Collins. Al-Farouq Aminu has been playing better again lately since Nurkic went down. So, and then Utah, Jay Crowder, guys like that. So this is where I think you dump one guy with 4 games the rest of the way for someone with 6. It's a nice gain, but you got to save the other moves. And then I think as the week wears on and your risk slowly decreases, let's say, and we'll probably bring this back up again at some point later in our week. Let's say you get to like Thursday. None of your guys have been shut down yet. Cool. Friday through the end of the week, the maximum number of games you're going to see is 4, which is still something. But I think on Friday that means that if you wait until later in the day and none of your guys get shut down, if you have someone on your team, like, say, a Boston Celtic, that only goes 3 games Friday through Sunday, maybe you trade them in for someone with 4. Or maybe you wait until Saturday, where the Celtics only have 2 games, and you trade them in for someone with 3. So that's where you start to, I think, make your moves. Yes, you may not gain quite as many games, but if you use up 2 or 3 moves early in the week and you have 2 guys shut down on Friday, that could cost you 8 games or 3 or 4 per guy that you can't replace. And that's a way bigger loss than the 1 to 2 games you can gain by long streaming. So it doesn't work these week and a half unless you have a boatload of moves you can make. Most of us don't have that. All right. Let's get into the reverse chronological lightning round. We'll go through this thing the same old way, but we'll, of course, make mention of how these teams' schedules look down the stretch and what we learn. Milwaukee losing in overtime to Atlanta. Milwaukee sat their entire roster. Eric Bledsoe, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Chris Middleton. Tony Snell is actually injured, we think. So Tim Frazier played 53 minutes in this ballgame. He did not take a break. That's freaking crazy. He had 20 points, 7 rebounds, 15 assists. Sterling Brown had 27 and 9. I mean, you got some crazy, wacky fantasy lines in this game, and you just can't expect that type of thing's going to happen regularly. The Bucks have 5 games the rest of the way. This was one of their 2 back-to-backs. So you might see everybody rested on Friday or Saturday. Something to keep watch on. But again, I don't think you're picking up any of these other guys in the hopes that they play more than, one big game. Nah. Taurean Prince is out with foot soreness. They call it bilateral, which I assume means both. I don't know. Maybe it's sore on both sides of the same foot. In any event, John Collins, big minutes. Justin Anderson got the start and doubled. So they're giving guys a look. Dwayne Dedmon was shut down over the weekend, so that means Alex Len is going to be the starting center. He deserves a look. Atlanta is a really cool fantasy gold mine right now. Yes, they only have 5 games the rest of the way. You could ride them for their 4 games this week, and if no one on your team gets shut down, you drop them for somebody with 2 games that final 3 days, because their only game the final 3 days is on the very heavy Wednesday. Atlanta's a cool one, though. You got a lot of stuff going on there. Just keep an eye on who's actually playing. Still, if Justin Anderson is starting and playing 31 minutes, they're giving him a long, legitimate look. We should, too. Dallas beats Oklahoma City. The Thunder are in a devastating slump right now. They are, luckily, in the playoffs, so nothing's really going to change that. They've got a 6-game lead over the Kings, which means everybody is statistically eliminated. The West is set. The Thunder now are tied with the Spurs, and one of these teams is going to get the Warriors, and one of them is going to get the Nuggets, most likely. One of them's got to get it figured out. Good heavens. Well. Thunder. What does their schedule look like down the stretch? Not great. They got 5 games. Could be worse, I guess. If you've got your Thunder regulars, you just roll them out there. Dallas, mentioned they're a 6-game team. Dwight Powell, good. Maxi Kleba had an off night. Trey Burke put up 25 points. As the great Aaron Brewski suggested, he might go a little nuts with Luka Doncic dealing with a right thigh contusion. I don't know what his status is going to be. Doncic has been playing through things this year. It doesn't seem like he needs to, but here we are. Jalen Brunson had kind of a weird game. He'll have a popcorn set of numbers most of the time. I think he'd be an okay 6-gamer to use, too. Lakers have totally ruined the ability of tanking. They shut down LeBron James, and then they just thwomped the Pelicans for their 35th win of the year. Lakers look like they've now placed themselves out of a decent lottery pick by passing the Timberwolves. You dummies. Get it figured out, Lakers. They almost have a better record than the Hornets now. Be careful, for goodness sake. Rajon Rondo, a couple of huge games last week. Alex Caruso playing really well. KCP playing well. JaVale McGee playing well. I mean, hell, even Reggie Bullock had a nice ball game in this one. When you put up a $130, there are going to be some pretty good numbers. Lance Stevenson played 16 minutes, and was awful. He was actually putting up pretty good numbers. No Kyle Kuzma, so that allowed a little bit more other stuff. But, with the Lakers, they've suddenly turned into a great fantasy land. They've got 4 games this week and then 1 on that last Tuesday. So, certainly worth holding, I think. Rondo, Caruso, McGee, KCP, to me, are the guys you're running out there. And then probably Kuzma if we get word that he's playing in the next one. For New Orleans, I mentioned they're a terrible fantasy team right now. Alfred Payton's cooled off. Julius Randle is probably worth holding. Christian Wood worth holding, I would think. If you have anybody besides the 3 guys, or like Kenrick Williams or AD or Darius Miller, if he's still around somewhere. I mean, these types of guys, Check Diallo even, those guys were probably the one you could think about dropping for someone with 6 games the rest of the way. Sacramento, suddenly the pressure off. They're winning games again. They beat the Spurs on the road. This is a big deal because San Antonio has been very good at home. DeMar DeRozan has slowed down a little bit. LaMarcus Aldridge finally had a good ball game, but they just couldn't really stop the Kings, who vastly outshot them at the free throw line. Buddy Hield was terrific. Bogdan finally had a good ball game. Willie Cauley-Stein kind of waking back up. They got contributions across the board. For the Kings, their schedule, they've got a 5-gamer. So, again, you're basically just squatting on these guys. They're not anyone you're reaching out to pick up. By the way, Bielitsa played in this one. Surprise twist. After missing the last 2 with a stomach bug. No Marvin Bagley, no Harry Giles. Washington, they've got that crummy schedule. If you're sitting on these guys, Thomas Bryant, Bradley Beal, Jabari Parker, Tomas Satoransky, Bobby Portis are probably the dudes that are on your team. It's a tough call with only the 4-game week. Beal is in. I'm going to say Bryant is in. He's been playing really well. Portis has been pretty hit or miss. He had one gigantic game last week and then came back with a couple of clunkers. I think he's a guy that if you had to, you could cut him. I'm going to put the same marker on Satoransky, who's been pretty good in kind of the across-the-board realm, but almost no upside. I'm not actively seeking to drop these dudes, but if I'm looking for a 6-gamer and the Wizards are the 4-gamers that I have, of those guys, you can see that's basically the way that I'd stack them up. Denver, same old stuff. Jamal Murray turned his ankle. We'll see how that whole thing shakes out. You're probably rolling the starters out there, but no one else because they have 6 games. If they didn't, I think I'd tell you to get out from under guys like maybe even Barton and Harris, and you roll with just Jokic, who got ejected, Jamal Murray, and Paul Millsap. But with 6 games, you can extend it to the rest of the starters, too. They'll do enough. They'll pile up enough over 6 games to make it relevant. Charlotte, I mentioned during the outset, they've got 6 the rest of the way. Tough one in Utah tonight, but then they've got the Pels, tough one with Toronto, Detroit, Cleveland, Orlando. It's a mixed bag, I guess, but nice to see Jeremy Lamb play a little bit better in this ballgame. They're trying things now, and frankly, I don't know who's going to play on a night-to-night basis. I don't know if Kemba Walker is done. He played in this ballgame, but the Hornets look like they're on the outside looking in. They're still only 3 games back, so not statistically eliminated, but a team in between themselves and the Heat. That's the Magic. They pretty much have to run the table at this point to get into the playoffs. They are shortly to be eliminated, and then you'll probably see things turn even farther. You might see Kemba, Batum, Lamb could all actually get shut down. I just don't know. Dwayne Bacon played a team, Miles Bridges actually played a team-high 30 minutes in this game. Dwayne Bacon's second highest number at 28. I think you could use those guys in a 6-game week with the expectation that even if they're sort of playing 3rd, 4th, 5th fiddle at the beginning of this stretch, by the end, they're probably going to be the guys getting turned loose to go shoot the lights out. Boogie got ejected on the Warriors side. They've got 6 games the rest of the way, so if you're sitting on these dudes. 2 of them, however, are back-to-back sets, so it's really probably going to be more like 4 games for most of the regulars, and you roll with it. Memphis, Clippers. We mentioned the Clippers as a team with a 4-gamer. Shea, I think is actually the pronunciation. I think Shea is the one you consider as the drop if you had to. You're not actively seeking out. I mean, obviously, Zubats or Shamet would be the drop before Gilgeous-Alexander. I'm not talking about having those guys on your team. If you've been sitting on Gilgeous-Alexander because of the good playoff schedule and now it's turned sour, he's a potential guy you could turn into 6 games. I think you roll with Lou, you roll with Montrez, you roll with Gallo. And then Beverly, to me, is sort of right on the cusp. He's not looking healthy. Memphis is kind of middle of the pack. They've got a 5-game week, so if you've got their guys, you just sort of roll with them and see what happens. Of course, the big news that, thank goodness it didn't happen earlier last week for those of us who had him on so many finals teams. Jonas Valanciunas turned his ankle midway through the 3rd quarter of their game against the Clippers. It didn't look great. It wasn't the kind where the whole ankle goes underneath, but his leg was sort of out to the side when it happened, and so you wonder if there was some sort of tension that may have resonated up farther, like up towards the groin region. Hopefully we will learn more as today goes on. I don't think that I'm making any kind of preemptive drop because even if we only ended up with 4 games out of him, it would still be worth it. He's been amazing, and Memphis doesn't play until Wednesday. But if we find out that they're just going to pull the plug, call it quits, then obviously we make the adjustment there. They're in Portland, in Dallas. Dallas at home. We talked about this already, so they got some opportunities here. I mean, Valanciunas against Enes Kanter. You'd love to get JV in there against Enes Kanter playing no defense. Whoa, could be a magical time, but you just don't know. You just don't know. And this is one of those things where if we get to Wednesday and it's like, oh, Valanciunas, he's doubtful. If he's doubtful for Wednesday, that means he's probably not playing Friday and maybe not Sunday. So all of a sudden now, 3 games, that's an issue. Drop him for somebody with 6 at that point. Well, we've missed our window there. But if we get word that he's going to miss a week or whatever, any kind of non-day-to-day reaction, and we can make the move. This is why we have these moves for guys that are falling apart. And in the meantime, we'll just cross our fingers and hope for any kind of good news. Because, again, recording this podcast late at night after the Clippers-Grizzlies game has ended. We don't have the early morning report on JV, which you might by the time you listen to this. And then we can react accordingly. That's really all you can do with these injuries late in the year. It sucks. It's why I love roto. But I understand that there's a ton of head-to-head going on. I obviously have a few of them happening as well. So we'll continue to analyze as if both types of leagues could be happening. But it just kills you when an injury happens in these moments, in these unique times of the year where you just need your guys to hang on. Just please stay healthy these 3 weeks. You can miss half the season, just not these 3 weeks, and then a guy gets hurt. And you just don't know what to do. So let's try to get a little bit more info first. That's, I think, the only thing we can do right now, unless something pops up that says, oh, he's going to miss X amount of time. Again, I'm not going out to find anyone to add. But if I have these guys, if I have DeLon Wright, I'm continuing to use him. If I have Justin Holiday or Jonas Valanciunas, obviously, I'm continuing to use them. Same goes for Bruno Caboclo. And I know he's been super inconsistent, but they want to convey their pick. It's getting easier and easier to do so. Memphis is sitting at 31-45 on the year, which puts them, let's see. They're not quite with the Wizards, who got a win. So 4 teams in the East with a worse record than Memphis, 2 teams in the West. So 7th right now, 7th worst. I think they want to get out of that. So I'm pretty sure the Grizzlies are going to try to win out. So expect guys like Conley. He will play probably a couple of games down the stretch. Memphis has Portland, Dallas twice, Detroit, and Golden State. Dallas is going to be the teams they're trying to win, trying to beat twice. We shall see. That's probably a good thing if you have these guys on Memphis. That means the fairly predictable lot will be going out there and actually playing minutes. Turning the clock back to Saturday, Cleveland losing to the Clippers in dramatic fashion. Kevin Love was a late scratch. He got silly seasoned out of this ball game. And so Jordan Clarkson, Jetty Osman both took a ton of shots. So did Colin Sexton. This team is an ugly fantasy team. Really, truly ugly. They've got 5 games, though. So again, if you're sitting on them, you just roll with it. I already talked about the Clippers, so we'll jump over that one. Kings, likewise. Houston, they put up a $119 in a victory over Sacramento. James Harden triple-doubled with 50. Again, what a crazy year he's had. He's got 5 games down the stretch. So, basically, if I say someone's got 5 games and you're sitting on moves, you're just not doing anything right now. You're riding with them. The starting 5 for this team, you're sitting on. And if you're accidentally happened upon a guy like a Daniel House for streaming purposes, you probably just have to roll with it and hope it gets better in the next one. Talked about Boston and how their schedule kind of lightens up a little bit down the stretch. Horford and Irving sat out this one. Boston lost. But again, same thing. It's the same story. They've got 5 games the rest of the way. Do you trust Daniel Tice? Nah, not when not when Horford comes back. Aaron Baines hurt his ankle, I believe, was the injury in this one. Knee? Was it knee or ankle? Doesn't matter. Leg. He might miss some time, so, Tice might get his minutes. When Horford sits out, you could give Tice a look. More 9-caddy kind of thing. You just pick him up for one day, throw him back into the scrap heap the next. But if you're full-on streaming, you're sticking with the usual fare. The Jaylen Brownses, Gordon Hayward, Marcus Morris, that type. Brooklyn is a confusing lot. They have 5 games down the stretch. They've had a terrible playoff schedule. Went 4-2-3 if you managed to ride a Brooklyn net through the first round of your playoffs. Well, if your league is still going, at least they've got 5 now. So D'Angelo Russell, Joe Harris, Karis LeVert, Jarrett Allen, and I would say Spencer Dinwiddie as well. I know. It's not a super interesting thing right now. Basically, if I'm going to bring up a team and call them a 5-gamer, there's sort of nothing there for you. Orlando, 5-gamer. Indiana, 5-gamer. Who cares? You just roll with them at this point. Augustine, Isaac, Gordon, Vooch, Fournier even. If they're a 5-gamer, you stick with them. Same thing on the Indiana side. Basically, you're starting 5. And Domantas Sabonis. Easy. Portland. Okay, here's something different. They've got 6. And as I mentioned at the outset, you're looking for any advantage you have. So Enes Kanter is a great grab. I was frankly surprised that Mo Harkless played in both halves of the back-to-back. I thought he might have one of those sneaky rest days, but he ended up going for 10 and 10 with a steal and 3 blocks. So that gives me a lot of confidence that he's going to keep playing in the back-to-backs, and I think you could pick him up for a nice stretch run. Obviously Dame, Seth Curry, and I think Zach Collins. I know he didn't play a ton in this ball game. Tough matchup against the Pistons. Big team, so he was going to get pushed around. And then Aminu, who had an off night as well, but he's also been playing a little bit better. What do you got on the Detroit side? 6 games. All right, fun. Andre Drummond, obviously. Blake Griffin, obviously. But I think you can extend it now. Wayne Ellington with 6 games. I mean, he could get you 18 to 25 3-pointers in that amount of activity, which would be pretty sweet. Kennard, less exciting. Langston Galloway is sort of like your weird in-between guy there, which is, if you don't want the big, 7 3-pointer pop-off that Ellington could get, but probably also not the floor. Even Thon Maker in 6 games could give you, 6 to 10 blocks, I guess. Not my suggestion here, but at least it's relevant. Miami, I mentioned Dion Waiters earlier. He's been putting up big scoring lines. When a team's got 6, it brings a lot of extra guys into the mix. So you could make a case for certainly Kelly Olynyk, Dwayne Wade, Bam Adebayo, Dion Waiters, maybe even Hassan Whiteside as a possibility. We don't have any idea what's going on with Justice Winslow and Josh Richardson. That really complicates things. That's a tough call. Hopefully we'll have more information by tonight. It sounded like both guys were relatively close, and they need them. Bad. Miami's in the 8 seed with a half-game lead over the Orlando Magic. They're in a precipitous spot right now. Precarious. Ready for a precipitous drop is maybe what I should have said. So they can't screw around. If those guys come back and they got dropped in your league, that's a spot you got to be ready to pounce. New York. DeAndre Jordan sat this one out with rest. So what does that mean for him the rest of the way? Well, it was not a back-to-back. It was 1 game in a 2-game week. New York has 6 games the rest of the way. He might just rest a lot of them. We don't know yet. If he does, that really opens things up. Mitchell Robinson's going to go crazy. If DeAndre Jordan is really resting, Luke Cornett could actually be a thing. Emmanuel Mudiay, even with Dennis Smith Jr. back, Kevin Knox should be played with 6 games. You could even make a case for Damian Dotson, although he doesn't do a whole lot outside of the, scoring, and even that has been a bit questionable lately. But again, this is what you're looking for. You're looking for the sort of this weird miscellaneous, what can I get out of 6 games? Philadelphia's got 6 games. They got the main core guys. Do any of them get over the hump? Well, Jonah Bolden had a big ball game, but that was because Joel Embiid sat it out. Otherwise, it's a pretty predictable bunch. So, no, I don't think you're venturing any farther. The only one you could ever consider would be Boban, but there are too many times where he's more of a liability and could just disappear. Minnesota's got 6 games. So Wiggins is in. Obviously, Cat is in. Okogie is in. Tyus Jones is in. You could make cases for some of these other guys, like Jared Bayless is suddenly playing minutes again. 6 games can do an awful lot. But this is only for that one weird move you're using at the beginning of the week, right? We're going to reassess this stuff as we learn about more and more shutdowns. Toronto, 5-gamer. Chicago, 5-gamer. Now, Chicago's worth mentioning because they've shut down most of their team. So that's now suddenly freed up some interesting characters that if you haven't already picked up, guys like Walt Lemon, who, I don't know, will he play giant minutes? Timothé Luwawu-Cabarrot. Most of the regulars have already been ruled out for at least the beginning of this week, and the safe play, obviously, is Shaq Harrison. I don't think I would recommend going out on a limb with those other guys until they do it one more time. Already mentioned Memphis, and obviously we'll wait on the word from Valanciunas. Phoenix, they're Devin Booker and nobody else, right? I mean, they're, like the stuff they've got going on with that team. Usually it's the other way around where Booker usually gets shut down early. This time is everybody else, although it sounds like Rashawn Holmes will be back for the next one. And DeAndre Ayton will be out. So you could have a really cool Rashawn Holmes 5-game finish. He might be worth taking a flyer on this last little bit if indeed Ayton is going to miss any kind of time. And it sounds like he will. So that could end up being pretty cool. But Booker's going to keep taking 30 shots because the other guys on that team can't make any buckets. Like, legitimately, they cannot make buckets. They can't do anything at all. Woof, there's some bad players on that team. Quickly here now, we will turn our attention to Friday, make sure we didn't miss anybody. There are a couple of teams I don't think that played over the weekend, if I'm not mistaken. You know what? Actually, it might have just been Utah. Could that be right? Yeah, I think so. All right, we'll roll with it. So Utah, I believe, is the only team that didn't go over the weekend. Their schedule goes back to being better again. So they've got 6 games down the stretch. So if you wanted to move over, Derek Favors had back spasms. He had some back stuff earlier this year. I think he only missed 1 game, so I don't know that I'd completely readjust my expectations. I'm not dropping him until I get more word on how he's doing, but obviously Ingles, Mitchell, Gobert, and then Crowder gets a nice bump with Derek Favors out. That's the big adjustment. What do we got coming up tonight? Well, before we do that, big thank you to Hawaiian Isles, Kona Coffee, of course, for their continued partnership here at Hoopball. Please do check them out. Come on, man. If you haven't done it to this point, I don't know. I can't help you anymore. HawaiianIsles.com is the website, at HI Kona Coffee. Give it a check, for goodness sake. Revolutionize your coffee game. You'll love it. You're going to love it. HawaiianIsles.com. Search for Hawaiian Isles on Amazon. We love these guys. Fantasy enthusiasts. I hope they won their leagues. I got to check with our guys over at HI. Other thing, if you are a young programmer and you want to start demoing some stuff over here at Hoopball, let us know. Like I said, we're looking for some young folks that are okay to good at programming and just kind of getting started and are big into fantasy sports. It's an awesome way to pair things up. Hit me up on Twitter, at Dan Besbris. You know where to find me. And now quickly, Monday night. Again, all of our shows are going to be short now. This is officially the time when we roll into sort of off-season mode a little bit, just in terms of length, because there just isn't the same amount of stuff that needs to be discussed. Detroit is at Indiana. There's nothing huge of note in this ballgame. Sounds like most guys are probable to go. Orlando, Toronto, I think we can assume most guys are going. Milwaukee at Brooklyn. I would think that Milwaukee is going to be back to normal strength. I mean, what are we even looking for, right? Where there's like, at this point, if we're talked about it in the streaming section, there really isn't a whole lot else to go on. I mean, Luke Cornett is probably one of the names that we should be keeping an eye on for New York. If he can just get turned loose here down the stretch, he and Mitchell Robinson going nuts and that center and power forward spots, that's something. Chicago bringing in guys like Lemon. See if he can hold on to some kind of value. This is what we're looking for, because these are the guys that with 4 or 5 games where suddenly they go from playing 2 minutes to 40, they could be really interesting fantasy assets. We're always counting minutes. 5 games at 35 minutes is a big deal for someone who hadn't played it all before. Philly, there's nothing. Dallas, we'll keep an eye on Doncic. Charlotte, are they going young? Cleveland, does Kevin Love come back? Phoenix, we're talking about Rashawn Holmes going crazy down the stretch. He could be a really fun pickup. And that's what we're watching for. these wacky young guys. This is the full silly season, and as I said, there's really only one of them that I think I would recommend you pick up ahead of schedule, and that's Rashawn Holmes. Because if DeAndre Ayton is really going to miss a week, Holmes is usable even as the backup, but if he starts to play 30 minutes a night, he's a top 50, even top 40 kind of fantasy asset. So he's, I think, a guy you could look at as a preemptive grab, and then you just hold him for the rest of the week. Just grab him and run with it. Even if he loses the starting gig, I think he still ends up doing enough to be relevant because they're playing Dragan Bender, for goodness sake. Rashawn Holmes is 9 times the player Dragan Bender is. It's not close. Otherwise, I think we're mostly in wait-and-see mode with these guys. And that's what we shall do. Wait and see. I hope you guys won your leagues. Those of you that are still listening, let's see if we can carve out a few roto points here down the stretch. Or if you got your finals going, save 3 of your 4 moves. N-1. Save all but 1 of your moves, people. We're going to need them when guys get shut down. We can't afford to take zeros from guys that would be playing 3 or 4 games. That is what will crush you. It will crush you. And don't worry about having too many guys playing on the last day because half of them just won't play anyway. We'll talk about that as we get there. We're going right to the finish line, folks, and then we enter off-season mode where it's all about reflection. Reflection. This is Fantasy NBA Today, a hoopball presentation. Back at you tomorrow with a nice Halfer Tuesday. I think we will have a DFS contest this week on Wednesday, Halfer Thursday, and then Brew and I will have our last live show of the season on Friday. I am Dan Besbris. Good luck if your season continues. Congrats, or if it ended already. We'll talk to you tomorrow.
This has been a Hoop Ball presentation.